Hello and welcome to the Analyst dated 28th October 2023 by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be looking into important current affairs article from both the Hindu as well as Indian Express. And the handout of this very discussion is available in the description below. Let's have a look over the table of content, what all concepts we are going to discuss in today's Analyst. So firstly, we'll be looking into satellite internet. We'll try to understand how it functions, what is the advantages of satellite internet and what are the disadvantages of it. Then we'll be looking into PDS system. We'll try to understand what are its significance, what are the challenges that we are witnessing with regard to PDS, what all steps the government of India has taken and what more needs to be done. Then we'll be looking into India-Qatar relation, and in this regard, we'll try to understand how far India is dependent on Qatar for gas imports. Then we'll be looking into two concepts from prelims perspective. Firstly, we'll be looking into dark patterns. We'll try to understand what is this concept all about. And lastly, we'll be looking into star campaigners. Without wasting any time, let's begin our discussion. So, let's look into our first topic, which pertains to satellite internet, and this topic relates to this very aspect of your GS paper 3 syllabus. What is the context? So the context is, recently Reliance Jio has stated that it has demonstrated India's first gigabit satellite internet technology, and in this regard it is collaborating with a European company, that is SES. Now in this regard, the first thing that we need to understand is what is satellite internet. So in this, the internet services are provided with the help of communication satellites, which could be placed in any of these three orbits, that is low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit or geostationary orbit. So when it comes to satellite internet, we don't need phone connections, you do not need dial-up connections or optical fibers in order to access the internet. When it comes to satellite internet, we need three components. So first is your space satellite, which could be placed in any of these three orbits. Then we need ground stations, that is the gateways, which would be receiving and transmitting data to the space satellites in form of radio waves. And lastly, we need a transceiver, which would be at the user's place, okay, again to receive and transmit data in form of radio waves. So we need satellite dishes at all the three places: space satellite, gateways and your transceiver. And the user also need a modem, which would be basically changing the data signal in a readable form for your computer. And you also need a centralized network operations center, which would be monitoring this whole flow of information. So the next thing that we need to understand with regard to satellite internet, how is the flow of signals? So we have space satellite here, then the user is here, and here you have your ground stations, that is your gateways. So when you as a user try to access a particular website or try to look into a particular email, that information is transmitted by the transceiver to the space satellite. Then that data flows from space satellite to the ground stations, that is the gateways. And this data is processed by the centralized network operations center, that is your internet service provider. Again, this data would be transmitted from the gateways to the space satellite, and then it would be transmitted to the transceiver of the user. And ultimately it would be going to your modem, which would be interpreting that particular data signal in such a form which is readable by our particular computer networks. Now, when it comes to the communication satellites which are needed for satellite internet, it could be placed in different orbits. It could be placed in low Earth orbit. In this, the satellite would be positioned at 500 km to 2000 km above the Earth's surface. When it comes to medium Earth orbit, herein the satellite could be placed anywhere between the low Earth orbit and the geostationary orbit. And lastly, you have geostationary orbit. Herein the satellite would be positioned at around 36,000 km above the Earth's surface, which would be placed directly above the equator. Now we need to understand what are the advantages and disadvantages of the satellites which are placed in these three different orbits. When it comes to low Earth orbit, as the satellite is quite close to the Earth, so on account of this, here the latency is quite low and the speed of internet and the quality of internet is quite Good. What do I mean by latency? Latency is the time that we take in order to send the data and receive the data. So the time that you take in sending and receiving the data signal, that is termed as latency. So when it comes to the satellites which are placed in low Earth orbit, here the data signal has to travel very less distance. So on account of that, the latency is quite low. But the disadvantage when it comes to these sort of satellites is they travel at a speed of around 27,000 km per hour and they complete one revolution around the earth within 90 to 120 minutes. So they are able to cover very small area when it comes to the earth's surface. Now on account of that, in order to provide satellite internet in whole earth, you need a network of satellites to provide internet coverage to the entire earth. On account of this, there is huge cost. But what we have seen is majority of the companies which are providing the internet services through satellite internet, they have placed the communication satellite in low Earth orbit only. For example, Starlink and OneWeb. When it comes to medium Earth orbit, here the satellite is above what is there in case of low Earth orbit. So on account of this, what happens? The latency is high. Whereas when it comes to the satellites which are placed in this orbit, they are able to cover more area of the earth as compared to what the communication satellites which are placed in low Earth orbit are able to cover. So we need less number of satellites to provide satellite internet across the earth. Okay. So this is the positive, but this is the negative. So latency would be high. Coming to geostationary orbit, here the major benefit is that one communication satellite which is placed in this orbit is able to cover 1/3 of the Earth's surface. So we hardly need 3 to 4 communication satellites in order to provide satellite internet across the Earth. Another benefit is the satellites which are placed in this orbit, they travel at a speed of 11,000 km per hour and they complete one revolution around the earth in the same time, the time within which the earth completes one rotation on its axis. So on account of this, the observer A which is on the ground, it seems to that observer that the satellite is stationary. That is one of the reasons that why this orbit is termed as geostationary satellite. Okay. And on account of this, it becomes easier for us to connect with the communication satellite. But when it comes to the geostationary satellite orbit, satellites which are placed in this very orbit, here the latency is quite high. It is around 600 milliseconds. Why? Again, because the distance is quite high, okay, from the earth. So as the data signal has to travel a lot of distance, that is why the latency, that is the time that data signal takes to be sent and to be received, is quite high. Now let's look into the advantages of satellite internet. So first advantage is it provides us with faster speed. So it is 10 to 30 times faster as compared to the internet services which are provided with the help of dial-up connections. Then it is able to handle high bandwidth even when there is peak use. What do I mean by this? Even let's say at a particular time, if the number of users is quite high, then also it would not be having any impact, okay, it would not deteriorate the speed or the quality of your internet, okay. So it is able to handle high bandwidth. Then in case of satellite internet, we don't need any sort of phone line connections. It is more accessible. So the areas which are having very rough terrain, where it is very difficult to put in place the traditional telecom infra, okay, that is to put in place dial-up connections, cable, providing internet services with the help of optical fibers, etc. In those areas also, in those remote areas also, we can provide the internet services, we can make the internet services more accessible with the help of satellite internet. And lastly, these are better in case of disaster. Let's suppose a particular region A witnessed flood. Okay. So when a region witnessed flood, so the mobile towers, okay, they break down. But even in this scenario, the satellite internet would continue to operate, provided that the dish remains intact, okay, at all the three places that we discussed. So it is better, in the case of disaster, and it would come to our rescue when it comes to, carrying out rescue operations, especially during the disasters, and creating awareness when it comes to, let's say, a disaster is coming nearby as well. Then, what are the disadvantages of satellite internet? First disadvantage is speed. So although it is faster when it comes to dial-up connection, but its speed is less, it is slower as compared to the internet services which are provided with the help of fiber cables. When it comes to its speed, previously it was quite low. It was around 750 kilobits per second. With the advancement in technology, it has improved. Okay, so now it is around 150 megabits per second, and with the upcoming of 5G technology, it is anticipated that it would go to around 20 gigabits per second. So what are these kilobits, megabits and gigabits? These are basically parameters to analyze the rate of data transfer on a particular network. Then it has high latency because the data signal has to cover great distance. So when it comes to cable and fiber internet services, the latency is quite low here. It is only 20 to 50 milliseconds. But when it comes to space internet, the latency is quite high. It is around 600 milliseconds. On account of this, it severely, limits the application of satellite internet when it comes to gaming applications. So it could be, used majorly for web browsing and for, checking your emails only, on account of high latency. Then, in order to, access internet services with the help of communication satellites, we need clear skies. So whenever there would be rain, whenever there will be heavy snowfall, so in that scenario, the internet service would get disrupted. That is one of the major issue when it comes to satellite internet services. Then, when it comes to the cost, as we discussed right now, that when it comes to satellite internet, majority of the companies are basically putting in place the communication satellites where? In the lower Earth orbit, in order to make sure that the speed is high and latency is low. But in order to make sure, that the speed of the data signal is high, internet speed is high, latency is low, what they have to incur? They have to incur huge costs because they have to put in place a network of satellites in order to provide the internet services across the earth. Okay, so this is another disadvantage. Then, when it comes to satellite internet, we are providing these internet services with the help of communication satellites, which are positioned where? In the space. And in space, we witness solar storm. So solar storm is what? The electromagnetic particles continue to emit from the sun, okay, and they travel at the speed of light. So at times they, impact, they harm the communication satellites which are there in the space. For example, the Starlink lost around 40 satellites in February 2022 on account of geomagnetic storm. What is geomagnetic storm? So on account of the solar flares, okay, they impact the magnetosphere of the earth. This magnetosphere is basically created on account of the magnetic field of the earth, which protects us from these solar flares and solar storms. So on account of this geomagnetic storm, previously Starlink lost 40 satellites. This is again a huge cost. Then in space, we have the issue of space junk and space debris as well. What are space junk and space debris? So they can be natural as well as human made. Okay, naturals are your meteorites. When it comes to human made, the non-functional spacecrafts which are there in the space, that adds to space junk. So in the space, we have around 1 million objects which are larger than 1 centimeter in diameter. And these space chunk could, hit the communication satellites which are, positioned in the space in order to provide satellite internet, which could again lead to huge cost to the company which is providing this satellite internet. Although it has, these many disadvantages, but the experts have pointed out that satellite internet is the future. And with the advancement in technology, as we have witnessed with regard to speed and bandwidth, that how with the, upcoming of the 5G technology, the speed is improving. Similarly, the experts have pointed out that with the advancement in technology, we will be able to address this major disadvantages that we are witnessing with regard to satellite internet. That is all that we have to make note of from this very topic. Let's move to the next one. Now, the next topic relates to public distribution system, and this topic pertains to this very aspect of our GS paper 3 syllabus. We also have a previous year question in this regard. So after listening to this very discussion, try and attempt this very previous year question. So what is the context? So currently, the Enforcement Directorate has arrested West Bengal Forest Minister, that is Jyoti Priya Malik, over his alleged involvement in PDS scam in the West Bengal state, when he was Food and Supplies Minister during 2016 and 21. So what is this scam all about? So it is alleged that this very West Bengal minister collaborated with one of the businessmen, and what they did was they provided less food supply than was mandated under the PDS scheme. Okay, so at the price of 1 kg of flour, what the PDS supplier were actually receiving, they were receiving around 600 grams of flour. What happens to the left amount, that is 400 grams? So this was basically sold in the open market, and the profits which accrued from this open market sale was distributed among the the businessman, the minister, the fair price shop dealers, etc. Now, what is important from us when it comes to UPSC is the PDS system. Okay. So, what is this public distribution system? So, this was launched in 1947 itself. And through this, the government intend to provide the food grains like wheat, rice, coarse grains, as well as essential commodities like sugar, kerosene, especially to the poor sections of the Indian society at a highly subsidized rate, with the help of a network of fair price shops. So we have a network of around 4 lakh fair price shops. Then over a period of time, this scheme evolved, okay, because we tried to address the different lacunas that we were witnessing with regard to this public distribution system. We came up with revamped PDS in 1992 in order to improve the accessibility or the reach of this PDS system in the remote, the hilly areas, okay, and to the poorer sections which are living in those remote and hilly areas. And if you see, especially in the hilly areas and remote areas, actually the disadvantaged section of the Indian society actually live. Then we came up with targeted PDS in 1997. This was done in order to focus on the poor sections of the Indian society. Okay, so under this, we divided the beneficiary of the PDS into components. Okay, so one is BPL, other is APL. Below poverty line, above poverty line. In order to identify which all families would be coming under the BPL category, the states used the Planning Commission state-wise poverty estimates of 1993-94, which was basically prepared based on the methodology which was given by Lakhdawala Committee. When it comes to the BPL families, so their entitlements was increased from 10 kg to 20 kg of food grains per month, and they were supposed to pay half the prices what the APL families were supposed to pay, okay, when it comes to the food grains and the essential commodities which were provided under the PDS. Then the National Sample Survey found out that after even after coming up with PDS, 5% of our population is still going to bed with an empty stomach. They are not able to afford 2 meals per day. So in this background, the government came up with Antyodaya Anna Yojana in 2000, which basically intend to focus on the poorest among the poor section. So initially the beneficiaries were around 1 crore, and over a period of time the beneficiaries increased to around 2.5 crore. So what was the eligibility when it comes to identifying the beneficiary? So if any family is headed by a person who is a widow, who is ill, who is above 60 years of age, okay, and they do not have any means of sustenance, so such families would be covered under the Antyodaya Anna Yojana, and they would be provided the food grains at a highly subsidized rate, that is at 2 rupees per kg. When it comes to wheat, they'll be provided rice at a rate of 3 rupees per kg, and when it comes to coarse grain, rupees 1 per kg. And the Antyodaya families were entitled to around 35 kgs of food grains per month. Then in 2013, we came up with National Food Security Act 2013, which basically made right to food a justiciable right. And under this act, we cover around 50% of the urban population and around 75% of the rural population. And under this, there are two components. One is the Antyodaya Anna Yojana households, and another is the priority households. So when it comes to Antyodaya Anna families, okay, so they would be provided with 35 kgs of food grains per month, irrespective of the number of family members that particular household is having. But when it comes to priority households, they would be provided with the food grains based on the number of family members. So every family member, when it comes to priority households, would be entitled to around 5 kg of food grain per month. Okay. Now another aspect that we need to understand with regard to this article is how the PDS system actually works. So at the initial level, the crops, the rice, wheat, sugar is basically procured by the Food Corporation of India from the farmers at the minimum support price. Then this Food Corporation of India from its godown allocates the food grains to the state governments at a central issue price. Further, the state government distributes these food grains to fair price shops, okay, at the central issue price again, and ultimately it reaches the beneficiary. So this is how the PDS system functions. Then another aspect that we need to understand is what is the importance of PDS. It plays a very crucial role in ensuring food and nutritional security, because we know even today a lot of sections of our Indian society are not able to afford food, okay, 2 meals a day. So in this regard, PDS system plays a very important role in ensuring food security in India. Then it plays a crucial role in stabilizing food prices as well. How come? So as the food grains under the PDS are basically given to the poorer sections of the Indian society at a very subsidized rate. So this increases the supply of food grains in the market given the demand, okay. So this ensures in keeping the price in check, okay. If the reverse would have happened, let's say the supply is very less and the demand is quite high, then the price of food grains would have gone up to a great extent. So PDS also plays a very prominent role in stabilizing the food prices by ensuring that the supply and demand, okay, an equilibrium is established between them, so that the food inflation is not witnessed in India. Then it ensures equity in outreach. How come? We know that when it comes to India, there are certain regions which are considered to be food basket, especially the northwest region of India, okay, and there are other regions, for example, Rajasthan is there, other drought prone areas are there, which are not able to produce that much of food grains, okay. So in this regard, PDS plays a very prominent role in ensuring that the supply of food grains is transferred from food, rich regions to the food deficit regions, and it also plays a very prominent role in ensuring access to food grains throughout the year. Okay, but if you go by the agriculture cycle, the food grains would be available at certain months only, but PDS plays a very prominent role in ensuring access to food grain throughout the year. Then it also incentivizes the farmer to grow certain crops, because as we discuss right now, the crops are procured by the Food Corporation of India at MSP, minimum support price. So this incentivizes the farmers to grow rice, paddy basically, wheat, etc. And this has played a very prominent role in enabling India to attain food self-sufficiency. We have been able to increase the food production from 50 million tons in 1950-51 to around 300 million tons in 2019 and 20. And as a result of it, India has become a net exporter of food grains. Okay, we are the 9th largest exporter of food grains. Then it also maintains buffer stocks. So buffer stocks are basically maintained by the Food Corporation of India, and this ensures, again, as we have discussed, food flow even during the dry periods. Okay, so this is the major significance of PDS system. Now, what are the issues that we are witnessing when it comes to the implementation of PDS? First is issues in identification of beneficiaries. So when it comes to the beneficiaries under the PDS system, we are witnessing ghost cards. What are these ghost cards? So these ration cards are basically made in name of such person who are not existent, okay, who do not exist in reality. And the ration which is taken on such ghost cards are basically driven to open market to earn profits again. And there is inclusion as well as exclusion error. So according to expert group in 2009, it pointed out that there is around 61% error of exclusion and 25% inclusion errors as well. What do I mean by exclusion error and inclusion errors? So when it comes to exclusion errors, so what we are doing is we are identifying a poor household as non-poor. And when it comes to inclusion errors, we are doing the reverse. We are identifying a non-poor household as a poor household. So this is one of the major issue when it comes to the PDS scheme. Then there is leakages of the food grains. So there are transportation leakages, as and when the trucks carrying the food grains are moving from state godowns to the fair price shops. There is black marketing by the fair price shop owners as well. And this is quite prevalent and it is quite high when it comes to leakages of food grains when it comes to Assam and UP. And currently we are discussing with regard to West Bengal. So this is a major issue. Then on account of open-ended procurement, what do I mean by open-ended procurement? Even when the buffer stocks are filled, then also FCI continue to procure the the food grains from the farmers. On account of this, what happens? This reduces the supply of the food grains in the open market, which at times lead to food inflation. Okay, because the supply of food grains get reduced in the open market. Another issue on account of this open-ended procurement is, now the buffer stocks are filled, and another issue with the FCI godowns is they do not have scientific storage mechanism. On account of this, what we witness is rotting of food grains. And in this regard, Comptroller and Auditor General of India has also pointed out that when it comes to FCI godowns, it does not have requisitory storage facilities. And in an RTI reply, the Food Corporation of India has itself given this reply that we lost around this much tons of food grains since 2014 on account of lack of scientific storage facilities. This, leads to a huge problem, that is food wastage. Then it discourages crop diversification. Why? Because on account of minimum support price, the price at which the food grains are procured by the FCI from the farmers, it is incentivizing the farmers to grow only certain water intensive crops like rice. This is severely impacting the crop diversification in India. So the farmers are not practicing horticulture. They are not, sowing the millets or oil seeds, etc. Because crop diversification is also needed in order to address the issue of hidden hunger and nutritional, security, in order to make sure that nutritional security is there. Then it is also leading to certain environmental issues. Right now we discuss that farmers are growing water intensive crops on account of MSP, minimum support price. So what is happening on account of this in the northwest region of India especially, the water table is gone down to a great extent by 33 centimeter per year during 2002 and 2008. Okay, and we are also witnessing other sort of environmental issues, that is on account of overuse of chemical fertilizers, we are also witnessing soil degradation. Okay, so these are the major issues that we are witnessing with regard to PDS. Let's look into the steps that the government of India has taken and the steps which the different states government has taken in order to reform the PDS system. So the government has provided Aadhaar linkage and digitization of ration card, which would go a long way in addressing the ghost ration cards. And it would also enable us to address the exclusion and inclusion errors that we are witnessing with regard to PDS. Then we have also computerized fair price shops. So it enables us to effectively track the transactions which are carried out by these fair price shop. Okay, so that there is no corruption when it comes to the fair price shops. Then direct benefit transfer. So the government is directly transferring the food subsidy in the accounts of the beneficiary. This is possible only through Aadhaar seeding. Okay, that is linkage of your Aadhaar card with your ration card. This goes a long way in reducing the corruption as well when it comes to leakages as well. Then we are using GPS technology in order to track the food trucks as and when they move from state depots to the fair price shops, so that there is no leakages when it comes to transportation of food grains from godowns to fair price shops. Then SMS based monitoring is also there. So the citizens can register themselves with the help of their mobile number, and accordingly they can get the SMS with regard to the dispatch and whether the food grains have been received at their nearest fair price shop or not. Then use of web-based citizens portal, wherein the citizens can raise their grievance if they have any with regard to, let's say, leakages or corruption when it comes to the implementation of PDS system. Then the government has come up with One Nation One Ration Card scheme. This is done in order to make sure that the migrant population is also able to access the benefits under the PDS scheme. So under this One Nation One Ration Card, what would happen? So if a migrant worker wants to get the food grains, then he can get that food grain through biometric or Aadhaar authentication at any ration shop in anywhere in India. Okay, and whatever would be the balance left, that is the amount of food grains which that particular household was entitled to. Okay, so that balance could be taken up by the migrant workers household at their respective places. Okay, by using that same ration card. This go a long way in ensuring food security, especially with regard to the migrant section, because the poor people, we know that they work as casual laborers and they have to migrate from the rural areas to the urban areas, where when it comes to urban areas the food inflation is quite high. So in order to make sure that this migrant population also is able to access the benefits of PDS system, even though when they are not in their home place. So these are majorly the steps that the government of India has taken with regard to PDS. Let's look into that what needs to be done more going forward in order to improve the PDS system. So in this regard, we have Wadhwa committee report, which was set up in 2011, and it recommended that we need to go for end-to-end computerization. So we need to go for e-governance in order to improve transparency and accountability. And it also pointed out that different states should adopt the different models, like Gujarat model when it comes to ensuring identification, secure identification at the ration shops. Then we can also adopt the Karnataka model, wherein it has went for e-PDS. It has computerized the whole supply chain. So it would go a long way in addressing the transportation leakages, the leakages at fair price shops as well. Okay, because with the computerization of the whole supply chain, we will be able to check the leakages at different stages. Then we can also adopt the Tamil Nadu model, which has went for universal PDS. So it is providing the food grains at a subsidized rate to every household. Then we also have Shanta Kumar committee recommendation in order to reform the PDS system. So what it has stated is, when it comes to the storage facilities, as we discuss right now, on account of lack of scientific storage facilities, we are witnessing food wastage. So in order to address that, the Shanta Kumar committee has recommended that we need to come up with scientific storage facilities. And the government would not be able to come up with, so much money, so much financial resources. So in that regard, the Shanta Kumar committee has recommended that we should go for PPP model, okay, public-private partnership model, wherein the government would be able to make use of the financial resources which are available with the private sector and the requisite expertise also which is available with the private sector in order to come up with scientific storage facility when it comes to the PDS system. Then the committee has further recommended that we should do timely liquidation of the buffer stock. So the FCI should not continue procurement of crops when the buffer stocks are filled. Okay, and how it can do so? Whenever the buffer stock limit is reached, we need to offload the surplus stock either in the open market, or we can export that particular thing as per the need, in order to prevent rotting of food grains in the FCI godowns on account of oversupply. Then limit the procurement of rice, okay, in order to address the different environmental issues that we are witnessing on account of providing minimum support price, especially for such water intensive crops. And government should also further promote crop diversification going forward, because that is needed to address the menace of hidden hunger. What is hidden hunger? It basically refers to lack of vitamins and minerals. And in order to address hidden hunger, we need nutritional diversity. Then, in order to address leakages when it comes to PDS, we can go for social audits. So what are social audits? Wherein there is active involvement of basically the beneficiaries of that particular scheme, wherein the people or the community examine the official records and what is the reality at the ground level. So it is different from financial audits. When it comes to financial audits, we only audit the financial transactions, okay, that what is the financial status of a particular organization. But when it comes to social audit, which in this we actually try to assess that whether a particular scheme has been able to realize its intended objective or not. It does not merely looks into the financial transactions only. And in this regard, we should seek the participation of self-help groups, cooperatives as well as NGOs. And lastly, in order to attain nutritional security, we should go for biofortified foods. We can also provide biofortified foods under the PDS. What are biofortified foods? Wherein we increase the nutritional element in a particular crop at the growing stage only. Okay, nutritional content as in iron, zinc, essential vitamins, minerals, etc. through certain ways, through biotechnology, through agroeconomy, that is, using such fertilizers which could increase the amount of such nutrition in the crops when it is growing. Or we can also use for plant breeding. Okay, so we can go for cross breeding of the plants so that the plant could acquire the necessary nutrition. Okay. So this plant breeding you need to do for, a lot of generations. This is all that we have to make note of from this very topic. Let's move to the next one. Now the next topic pertains to India-Qatar relations, and in this we are also going to look into the gas import dependency of India when it comes to Qatar. This topic pertains to this very aspect of your GS paper 2 syllabus, and the context is the death sentence given to 8 former personnel of Indian Navy by a court in Qatar presents the biggest challenge yet to India's historically friendly ties with Doha. Because when it comes to India and Qatar, India is largely dependent on Qatar when it comes to the gas imports. Now, in this regard, the first thing that we need to understand is certain prelim pointers when it comes to Qatar, the locational aspect. So when it comes to Qatar, it is located in Western Asia, here, on the northeastern coast of Arabian Peninsula, and it shares its international boundary with the Saudi Arabia in the south, and rest of the 3 sides it is surrounded by the Persian Gulf. Its capital is at Doha, and it is also a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which was created in 1981 and which have all these 6 members: Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman and Qatar. And this Gulf Cooperation Council have its secretariat at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So basically these 6 countries try to cooperate with each other by referring to their Arab and Islamic cultural linkages. Now let's look into India-Qatar relations. Why Qatar is so important for India? When it comes to the economic relations, India is considered to be the 4th largest export destination for Qatar. And when it comes to the Qatar's key exports to India, we have liquefied natural gas, LPG, chemicals, petrochemicals, fertilizers, etc. When it comes to India's key exports to Qatar, we have cereals, copper articles, steel articles, vegetable fruits, etc. So they have very close economic relation. They also have very close commercial relations as well, because majority of our companies, Indian companies are present in Qatar. For example, Tata Consultancy, Wipro, Mahindra Tech, etc. They also cooperate, the 2 states also cooperate when it comes to their banking sector, and they also have India-Qatar Startup Bridge, which basically intends to integrate the startup ecosystem when it comes to the 2 nations. Coming to the energy relation, as I have pointed out previously also, when it comes to India, we are largely dependent on Qatar when it comes to especially the gas imports. So India, imports around 50% of its gas requirement from, different states, and the government is planning to increase the share of natural gas in the energy mix from presently 6% to around 15% by 2030. Because when it comes to natural gas, it is less costlier as compared to crude oil, and it is also an, environment friendly fuel as compared to petrol and diesel. When it comes to India, we import around 40% of our needs for natural gas from Qatar. If you look at the trade between India and Qatar in the financial year 2022-23, India imported, the India imports valued at around this billion. And when we look at the value of liquefied natural gas imports from Qatar, it was around this billion. So with this data, we can very well understand that India is largely dependent on Qatar when it comes to the gas imports. Then when it comes to defense relation, India-Qatar Defense Cooperation Agreement is there. With the help of this agreement, both nations cooperate when it comes to defense matters. And they also have a naval exercise which is referred to as Zahr al-Bahr. When it comes to the cultural relation, so time and again there is exchange of artists between India and Qatar, and those artists perform at the events which are organized by Indian Cultural Center, which is in Qatar. Then when the India proposed yoga, International Yoga Day at the United Nations, then Qatar supported India in that regard, and ultimately International Yoga Day is celebrated at 21st June. Then when it comes to education, we have 14 Indian schools which are operational in Qatar and which are basically following the CBSE curriculum, which is catering to around 30,000 students, and these 30,000 students are basically the children of the people who are of Indian origin, basically the Indian nationals. Then when it comes to people ties, we have around this many Indians who are working in different sectors of Qatar, and when it comes to the remittances which is coming from Qatar to India, it is valued around $750 million per annum. So by looking at the different facets of India-Qatar relation, we can very well understand that both the nations share quite good relations with each other, and the major point is energy dependency when it comes to India and Qatar. Now in this background, the issue which has taken place, in that regard, India need to make use of its diplomatic channels, and it also need to look into the legal appeals which India can make. It should make use of its diplomatic channel in order to effectively resolve the issue which has currently popped up when it comes to India-Qatar relations. That is all with regard to this article. Let's move to the next one. Now this next article pertains to dark patterns, and this topic relates to this very aspect of our prelim syllabus. What is the context? So the context is, following complaints of dark pattern sales by airlines on online travel agents, Ministry of Civil Aviation has asked Indigo Airlines to rectify its website. Comes to dark pattern. This term was basically coined by Harry Brignall, who was basically a UK-based researcher of human-computer interactions. And this term he used to describe the ways in which the software can subtly trick users into doing things they didn't mean to do. When it comes to dark pattern, these are the deceptive methods which are used by the companies in order to make you buy such products or services which you didn't want it to buy. We'll be able to understand the dark pattern with the help of certain examples. These are the different sort of deceptive tactics which we refer to as dark patterns, which are used by different companies. When it comes to Rothschild model basically imply that it is easy to start sign up subscription, but quitting is hard. This is something that we witnessed with regard to Amazon Prime subscription in the European Union nations. Okay, so what happened in European nations when it comes to Amazon Prime subscription, it was easier for you to apply for Amazon Prime subscription, but it has multi-stage cancellation steps when it comes to cancelling the Amazon Prime subscription. So this is referred to as Roche model. Then forced continuity is also something that we witnessed. Then obscured pricing, so making it hard for you to compare the prices. Similar to it, deliberate misdirection, floating the user's direction to more expensive option, hiding the cheaper one. Another prominent dark pattern is sneak into basket. When you are ordering certain product and suddenly another subscription or another product would be added to your basket without your consent. If you do not pay attention to that, then you will be paying the additional price for that. And at times there is misinformation also. So these are the different sort of dark patterns which are used by the giant companies. Now in this regard, we need to understand that how it affects the users. So at times the users are forced to provide such personal information which they are not intended to provide. For example, when it comes to LinkedIn, time and again you will be getting messages from malicious users which would be requiring you to provide the information which you are not intending to provide actually. Then you could end up buying such products which you did not intended to buy. And it also somewhere impacts the user experience. This is something which is a prominent example when it comes to YouTube. So whenever you watch a video, time and again ads pop up, okay, thumbnail of different videos would come. This is done to affect your user experience, and time and again the YouTube does this in order to make you apply for YouTube Premium so that you could avoid the ads. So this is a deceptive technique which is used by such giant corporations in order to make you buy such products which you initially did not intended to buy. When it comes to India's approach to address the dark patterns, we have Advertising Standard Council of India, which is basically a self-regulatory body which looks into the advertising domain of India. And it has formed a task force to look into this very issue. And previously also the government of India has come up with certain guidelines to monitor the dark patterns. That is all that we have to make note of from this very topic. Let's move to the next one. Now this next topic pertains to star campaigners, and this topic relates to this very aspect of our prelim syllabus. What is the context? Currently, the BJP has issued its list of star campaigners for the upcoming MP assembly elections. Now in this regard, we need to understand what are these star campaigners. So when it comes to star campaigners, currently we do not have any law which governs that who can or who cannot be made a star campaigners. In this regard, the concerned political party would be nominating its candidate that okay, this person is going to act as a star campaigner for a particular political party. Okay, it would be specifying their constituencies as well as the duration of that particular status. When it comes to the number of star campaigners, so a recognized national or state party can have around 40 star campaigners, but when it comes to unrecognized political party, it can merely have 20 star campaigners. What do I mean by unrecognized political parties? These are such parties which are registered with the Election Commission of India under section 29A of RPA Act 1951. Okay, but they have not contested the election, or when they have contested the election, they have not attained the requisite votes, okay, or the requisite seats which they require in order to get recognized as national or state party, or they have recently registered themselves with the Election Commission of India. Such political parties are referred to be as unrecognized political parties. Then another question that we need to look into is why political parties appoint star campaigners. So it is on account of fame of that particular candidate through which the political party is trying to attract a lot of voters. But apart from the fame, the real cause is the poll expenses. So when it comes to the poll expenses, the cap on the expenditure is determined by the Election Commission of India under Model Code of Conduct. And currently, the cap on election expenditure is around 70 lakh for most states in one constituency by each candidate. Okay. And when it comes to section 10A of RPA Act 1951, if you give inaccurate account of your election expenditure, or you breach the cap of election expenditure, then you could draw disqualification for up to 3 years. When it comes to the expenses of electioneering, okay, with regard to star campaigners, so this expenditure would be actually borne by the political party. That expenditure would not be adding to the election expenditure of that particular candidate. Okay. Now, there are certain guidelines which we need to make note of when it comes to star campaigners. So, the star campaigners need to stick to general campaigning for that political party, and if another candidate is saying, is sharing the stage with the star campaigner, then what would happen? The entire campaign cost except the expenditure incurred on traveling would be added to that particular candidate's election expenses, which is sharing the stage with the star campaigner. Or the expenditure incurred on the rally would be shared equally by the contestant if more than one candidate share the stage with the star campaigner. And if the candidates are not present, but their posters or photographs have been displayed in their constituency where a star campaigner holds a poll rally, then the entire expense would be added to the election expense of that particular candidate. So these are the guidelines which are there with regard to star campaigners. When it comes to guidelines for Prime Minister, who is currently Prime Minister, or former Prime Minister, when they act as star campaigners, then the cost of their security, that is the cost when it comes to ensuring bulletproof vehicles, that cost is borne by the government itself. Okay, it is not added to the election expenditure of the respective political party, or it is not added to the poll election expenditure when it comes to that respective candidate. And if any other candidate is sharing the stage with Prime Minister or former Prime Minister, when they are acting as star campaigner, then such a candidate has to bear around 50% of the security cost of such a political rally. That is all that we have to make note of from this very session of analysis. Thank you for listening to this very discussion, and all the very best for your preparation.